So Christians cussing, right? So like I mentioned earlier, pretty well-known pastor, I think. He doesn't really pastor a church now, but he has a show called The Basement. Was on a YouTuber show, and they were talking about an episode I guess he had. I haven't seen the episode personally, but he apparently dropped, an F-bomb.
We the talk show where we're kicking it and having fun on inspirational radio. We the talk show, kicking it and having fun. So turn your radio up.
And he was basically explaining that one, the show that he does on YouTube, or I guess it's on Spotify, and the podcast that he does is more of a secular show. It's designed not just for church people, but it's designed to go out and reach the world and reach people where they're at. So a lot of his guests aren't necessarily in church or come from that background, and I'm assuming that this guest really wasn't from that background, and they were talking about, something that was very passionate to him. I think it had something to do with women's rights or rights in a relationship or something like that. And he dropped the F-bomb. And so it just got me thinking, I guess because we've been in this lens on a couple of our shows in the past about judgment and what that really looks like, because I'm sure it was brought up on Ruslan's show because he got a lot of backlash for that. Like, how could you, being a pastor, person that's been in a pulpit, will be in a pulpit, use some cussing words. I would definitely recommend, and I'll put the link in this description, then, go watch the show for yourself so you can see what he said about it. But it just does beg the question, I'll pose it to both of you guys, like what we feel about cussing Christians, cussing pastors, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Look, now we had disclaimer. We already had a discussion about this, and we're trying to be torn. Now, do we tell the real truth, or do we tell what the audience wants to hear? So when he brought it up, we all had our own ideas. And honestly, I'm gonna say this. I think people do what they do. They're human beings, pastor or not. And saying one cuss word is not gonna put you in hell. Saying one cuss word don't mean he not saved. It don't mean he don't love God. And I think even if you got an issue, it was one time. I don't think he runs around doing it, but I don't think it's probably appropriate for our audiences, because we don't want to believe that your favorite pastor curses. You don't want to believe that. So they have to not let it slip so they can keep their audience. But the truth is, the ones watching be cussing. The ones who judging them is cussing. Everybody don't cuss. Now, I'm gonna tell you, that's not what I'm saying at all. But usually the people who are the harshest have done the same thing. And I would say, have you ever cussed? If you go throw a stone at his one cussing. Because I really, I like the Young Man show. Like, I see his show, but I didn't particularly see that one. And I never heard him, cussing and stuff. But I have another take on it being too harsh. If they are, if they cussed or said something, it's like, okay, they said something, they was real passionate about it. But the truth is, I think people can't handle the truth about their favorite people and what they really do in private. And I don't think one cuss word is going to make you like, oh my God, I can't believe that. He doesn't really have what he has because he's cursing. I don't believe that. But I don't believe, it's appropriate for a younger audience. It's appropriate for, I guess, if you're on mainstream and everybody knows you, people can't handle you being who you are, and you have to take that into accountability when you are doing stuff live and in person. I'll say that. That's what I think about it. But I don't think it's going to condemn or make him any less of a person because they called him cussing, or he said that one thing because he was passionate. Like, shucks, you can stub your toe and people say something, or if you grow up in a family that says something.
Well, that there is a sect of believers that believe that, though. or say that they believe that. Because to your point, they believe that, by a person doing something like this openly, and he said, I don't cuss a lot, and it is a word that came out that I have used before in my day-to-day speak or whatever. And he said I can't guarantee that it's not going to come out again, depending on what the circumstances are, but who he's talking to. And I'll go a step further, because a couple of days later, he was doing his show on The Basement, and he had two young men that I think I've seen them on TikTok, and they usually talk about relationships, and they come from like an alpha male, I think, perspective, and they were talking about sexuality between, I guess, the difference between polygamy and monogamy or
monogamy.
There you go, monogamy. And so, he was explaining from a standpoint of being, married for over 25 years, the benefits, the pros and cons of being in a monogamous relationship. And, of course, they were trying to fill him out. And so that conversation got a little bit, a couple of cuss words came out. And I would say it even got a little graphic, in the discussion as well. But again, this isn't a Christian show. He is a Christian that's heading this show. But having a conversation with two young men that speak this language, that move and have conversations like that, I can see that from the Christian community, if it hasn't already, he's going to get a lot of backlash for some of that happening. And my question is really more on, is it warranted? Is it something? And it sounds like you saying it's it's not necessarily warranted, but it's going to happen, and we see it happen for a lot less. For a lot. I mean, and when I say less, let me say this: like, sin is sin to me. Doing certain it I think in God's eyes, like, this of sin and disobedience, it all smells the same, looks and probably feels the same to him. It's just he wants us to be in a much better place, I think, than that. And so when we were having that discussion, Dion, you said there was a guy that you what you called it, let me let you say it. What was it? A guilty pleasure?
It definitely was guilty pleasure, and he's known as the cussing pastor, and to me it's kind of like a farce, because whenever you put Christian in front of whatever you do, be it a platform or a performance or whatever the case may be, people have a certain expectation of what they're going to see behind that. And it's like cussing is not on that menu. It's not on there. It's not on there. It's not on there. So when you put Christian in front of your event or your whatever, they don't expect to see cussing on it. And when you do, it's kind of like, what? Wait a minute. What is this? And so, there is, and though they might do it or whatever in their private lives, if you do it enough in your private life, it's gonna slip out. And I'm gonna tell you, I've been a lot of places where I was nervous. I was really nervous. That, oh Lord, is this the time that it's gonna happen or whatever? But you just got to press through it and do what you got to do, and understand that you're on assignment, and you got to do what needs to be done. But to their point or to their concern or whatever, like I said, when they come out and you out here and you being interviewed or you in the pulpit, people are not expecting you to be up there cussing. That's not where they want you to do it at. I mean, if you do it in your private life, that's you. But don't get up here in the pulpit and start cussing. Like, it's a problem. It's a problem, especially for those that got a problem with it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, you up there cussing in the pulpit, and they gonna start cussing back at you. Don't be doing all that blank blank cussing in this blank blank church. So it's gonna be like that. So you gotta be careful.
And I like the interview between, you know, Ruslan and Pastor Tim Ross. Basically, Ruslan was saying he doesn't cuss, and the reason why he doesn't cuss on his platform and was because he wants to be consistent across the board. So he don't cuss in front of his kids. He don't cuss in front of, you know, he don't want to, you know, be different in different situations. But what I liked about it, what he said didn't come off judgmental for Tim Ross. It was, you know, pretty understanding, which kind of leads me to where I really want to go with this topic, because, you know, what it uncovers for me is the fact of, you know, I believe that, you know, when we talk about having more of a relationship with God than, you know, just a religious tradition with God, then, you know, in that relationship, you start getting personal conviction. And, you know, I've shared a couple of times on our show, you know, my testimony about, you know, why I listen to mostly, you know, Christian content music like hip hop and Christian hip hop and things like that. It's not because necessarily Shelton, you know, himself said, oh, all of a sudden I needed to do that. That was a conversation between me and God where he convicted me personally for that. And, you know, now in retrospect, I can look back and say, okay, I needed to be introduced to and know what Christian music was and sound like, to be able to speak to that based off of the purpose that God has me on. I need to have, you know, a clear, be fed, you know, the content that's coming from that, and the content that was coming from secular music was not going to really get me in the headspace or keep me in the headspace that I need to be in, you know, to have a platform that we're on now and that we'll be walking into. You know what I mean? So it was a personal thing for me. Now, what I can't do is, because, you know, God told me that I need to do this. I think, Dion, you mentioned last show that you listen to secular music. You know, no?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I can't come to Dion and be like, hey, man, you need to put down that secular music, man, because such and such, such, such and such and such, such. If God hasn't convicted Dion personally in that area, that's not a concern. Now, if Dion asks me why I don't listen to that, or if I want to introduce to him, and we can have a conversation, a discussion about that, but it's never going to be because God, you know, put this on my heart so strongly that because you're not doing it, you're not a good person, or, you know, you're not doing what God is asking you to do. That's not going to be that for me. And I really see that happening a lot in the Christian community, where, you know, we get a strong conviction ourselves, and then we have the passion, and we're very passionate about making sure that everybody else is on that same wavelength. And it's more than just sharing it. It's holding people accountable to something that God is asking us to do. So I really want to open that up, you know, to you guys. I think in the green, while we're in the green, I posed the question in a way I feel, and I don't know if I'm wrong or right. In the audience, I definitely want you to be a part of this conversation, so make sure you comment. You know, that we all have our personal convictions, our personal proclivities, our personal things that are hindrances for us, you know, as an individual. And God, being that he knows us, knows what we need to prioritize, what we need to work on, what we need to, you know, do to you know, move into different steps. He knows what buttons to push, what buttons to push first, and all of that. I believe that wholeheartedly, and I think we get in the way sometimes because, you know, because God is pushing this button in me, I want him to push that button in Lasagna. I want him to push that button in Dion too. So I don't feel like I'm the only one getting pushed out in that
I got something like I have worked in the hospitality industry, and I don't drink. And so they said, "Oh, son, you don't drink because you save." I said, "No, that's not why I don't drink." And they were like, because we notice at the events, we always, hospitality, that's what they do. You're expected to do. I said, "No, I don't drink because it's a bloodline issue. It's not, God didn't tell me this. It's just not wisdom. And life gonna get tight. And I don't want that to be my go-to. Because when I was a kid, like I like liquor, like a little kid. And who likes beer? And you 7 and 8 years old. I would get everybody's stuff and even it off, and they go back there and get our drinks, at the party. So I done drunk out of everybody's stuff, make sure I evened it up, and it was fine to me. And when we went to college, my friends would be like, "Ooh, I hate beer." And I'd be thinking, I didn't say nothing. So I tried other stuff. And I said, "No, this is a weakness for me, because how come you predisposed to something and you like it immediately?" So I said, "No, this is in my bloodline. So I don't drink to entertain a weakness," because my dad, he hated alcohol. Like somebody left something for, why? And then he would explain. He said, it makes people act a different type of way. And I seen it destroy my family. Like literally, people would do things they would normally do until they were in the influence. So he never drank. But I just didn't, because I like it. And I don't want to entertain it, because whatever your go-to is, when you get in a tight, you get in trouble, life get real, you're going to do that. That's just going to be your fallback. So I don't do it for my own self. It has nothing to do with sin. It has nothing to do. It's just history. That's why I just don't. But I can't tell everybody, better not be drinking, going to destroy. I'm not going to say that, because you may not. Because in France and other cultures, they drink wine with their dinner. They kids learn that as little people. So I'm never going to say that that's not what you should do. That's just not what's going to be wisdom for me, from what I know about my bloodline and me liking everything I tried and tasted. That's just not wisdom for me. So that's what I would say. I can't put that conviction off on everybody else, and tell them, put that look up, put it up. I don't say anything about that. That's your business. That's between you and whatever you can or cannot do with God, or what you can and cannot do because of your history. It's just not wisdom for me.
Right.
Because of what I know.
That makes all the sense in the world. I mean, I think I mentioned when we were in the green room, alcohol. I was the kid that said beer tastes nasty. You know what I mean?
I was the one talking about, woo!
I was that kid.
It's all right.
So alcohol for me was never like this thing I had to have. Even when I went to social events, it wasn't, I didn't have to have that. I didn't have to have it to have a good time, anything. Like I was, I was good without it. So, as far as when I do have a drink, it's always going to be something I have control over. You know what I mean? Whereas, I can see God, you're taking it like you were ahead of it, right? But imagine someone who isn't ahead of it and is, has a strong, taste for alcohol and gotta have it and goes to it from that. Like, yes, God, if he has that conviction and he puts that in your heart to, make sure you're putting that down and to really be, vigilant in your efforts towards that, because he knows that's something that can, be a stronghold for you. That's how I think that relationship works, and it don't start until you start having these open and transparent conversations with God, you know what I mean? And letting him touch these areas and these things and talk about these things that you don't really want to talk to nobody about.
So much. Let me try to unpack this slowly. Like with Sonia, I definitely have, kind of a family situation with alcoholism and everything. And I unfortunately had to learn that the hard way, even though I saw people drinking as a young kid and actually did some drinking myself as a young kid. One incident that my mom likes to talk about in certain circles is that when I was a baby, pretty much, I couldn't have been any more than like 2, 3 or so. I went into the refrigerator and got a can of Old English and took it down.
Old English.
Yeah. I was out of there. I was drunk. You hear me? Back then you couldn't really take your kids to the hospital, especially if you're black, because they'll take them from you and put them in the foster system.
Yeah. You had to sleep it off. Mm-hmm.
They had to walk me up and down the street until I came to a level where they could lay me down and I could go to sleep or whatever.
I'm sorry.
I had to come down. I was up to God.
That old English had you, son.
There's some grown people that can't drink old English, man.
Hey, don't play. And you 3.
I'm one of them.
You looking at a miracle. He's a walking testimony.
Hey, it's definitely, that coupled with some other incidents that I got into as a young man. I learned that alcohol is really not a thing for me or whatever, and so much so and so drastically that I had to, put that down for a while until my wisdom and everything caught up with that, because, during those times and all of those instances, I was too young to be dealing with that anyway. And so, once my maturity level got to where I could be a social drinker per se, then, I did that part of it. But even now, it's very, very rare that I'll take a drink up, and especially depending on what type of company I'm in, also, because, with that, there's so many instances where people have had their lives changed and altered forever because somebody done slipped something in your drink or something. And I'm ever vigilant about that because, I've known people who are totally different now because they were out at a gathering or whatever the case may be, and set their drink down and came back and drank it, and
it's true.
Been the same since. And so, my mom used to always tell me about that when I got ready to go out or whatever. Hey, be careful. Don't set your drink down. Be careful who you're around and stuff like that. And you try to shrug that off and be like, oh, Mom, this, that, and the third. But, that is real. That is a real thing. Like, people see sometimes your trajectory before you do and understand that you're walking in a certain purpose or what have you, and will try to derail you. And so, you have to be mindful, of who you with. But to the point of, this whole drinking thing or whatever, I mean, it for some is a real vice. And I don't judge you for whatever your vice is. If it's drinking, if it's cussing, if it's lying, or whatever the case may be, don't judge me for mine. Whatever I'm struggling with, if you're not going to try to help me, then, leave it alone. Don't touch it. And I'm not going to touch yours. If you come sloppy drunk to an event that we have, to a J Agape event, and you get up and get the mic and get the cussing, I'm not going to judge you or whatever. I'm going to let you finish your point, because even though I listen to secular music, there's still a lot of ministry in that if you're mature enough to handle that. If you're at a place where you can understand,
Your phone drunk right now.
What's that?
He got the drunk phone. You say your phone's drunk.
Yeah. So, if you're in a place where you can understand that, then you can receive that revelation. You can receive revelation from anything, whether it's a regular movie or a Christian movie or whatever the case may be. You just have to be at a place where you can glean that type of knowledge or whatever. And so, I can't condemn anybody for whatever music they listen to, and I hope they won't do the same with me, because I'm not listening to it to be carnal. A lot of times, some of the greatest times and the greatest breakthroughs I've had have come through secular music, because that artist may, be a Christian, but, their calling is into, a secular arena, to bring that message or what have you to the masses in that realm. And so you have to be.
And I think people don't always know what secular music means. Old MacDonald had a farm is secular. All secular is it's not talking about Jesus. It's not talking about the gospel.
That's it.
It's talking about, so Marvin Gaye, let's get it on. Old school, whatever you jazz, that's secular. So secular covers a whole lot of things. So to your point about, being able to learn from that, and I think I've shared this story about a pastor that I knew that is really gifted in music. Having an opportunity to work for Motown, and I think Motown in their R&B or whatever their section, and he was really, really torn because he's a pastor, and should he be working for Motown? And I was like, absolutely. Like the type of love songs that I hear now ain't really love, it ain't. It's lust. It's more on the freaky side. So we need more people that are familiar with real love and true love and what that looks like. In those type of places. You brought out Jay Agape. We haven't had a situation yet where anybody's grabbed our mics and started cussing. I thank God we ain't had that yet. But it's a platform though that we've set up to where we want to reach people that don't necessarily come to church or went to church, got some type of church hurt or something like that. So we strategically set it up in a way to where people don't feel like they're going to some religious, or traditional religious type event. And we do that purposely, right? And again, I remember, one of the people we used to work with, that when, as we were working towards getting our own buildings and stuff like that, we had a debate on should we serve alcohol, at Jay Agape events and things like that. And, my feeling was it, and again, keep in mind, I'm a person who don't necessarily struggle with alcohol, or I don't necessarily, have a problem with it. But my thought was that, I don't want to set up a situation to where someone who does have a problem with it, I'm helping them, fall into their own vice. So, my thought was, when you're opening up a restaurant or a place that is conducive to, people coming in, the way you normally make the most profit is through the alcohol portion of it. I'm not willing to, I'm willing to find another way for us to be profitable. I'm willing to trust God to make that situation profitable without having to, create something that might make somebody stumble or help somebody stumble in it,
Right.
And
I agree with that.
Yeah, so that's just an example. You mentioned lying. There's lusting. There's all these different things that people, I believe can struggle with, right? And different proclivities and different things that are strongholds for each one of us. And I think that's why it's important to have this conversation, because when we are judgmental about someone else, like we see somebody drinking, right? That might not even be their issue. As Paul would say, it might not even be their thorn. That might not even be what God is really focusing on in their life at that time to protect them from or get them out of. And here we are trying to get them to focus on something or trying to get them to, do something because that was something that was a personal proclivity to me or to that individual, if that makes sense. Like, I wonder sometimes, are we getting in the way of what God really is trying to do instead of encouraging them to have those conversations with God and to pray with those people and to pray for those people and intercede that, they have that relationship and God convicts them where he sees fit for their conviction. Because to me, this process, like, what Christ did on the cross, it's a done deal. Like, I know in the end, what he did was enough, for me. It was enough for my salvation. But this walk on earth, and while I'm in this flesh, is constant getting stuff out of my flesh that God needs out of the way. Like constant, I need your obedience in this. Sin is just disobedience. Like God tell you to do something, like give this homeless man $1, and you don't give that homeless man $1. That's disobedience. That's a sin. And again, I might be convicted by that. He may not have convicted you on that yet. I can't come to you and be like, hey, you better get every homeless man $1 or you going to hell. I can't do that. And we do that a lot. There's a good sect of us that do that.
Yep, I'm with you with that. I can't force you. Everybody have their own walk and their own timing and their own convictions. And even some stuff we might see as sin. God ain't dealing with them with that just now because I just pulled them in. That might be what he did with them the next month. Might be what he did with him the next year. We know what they do, but we don't know why they're doing it. And you don't know how deep in their foundation something could be. So you're not a master surgeon like God is. So he have to take his scalpel and cut it at the right time in the right position and get their heart in the right spot. And he's the only one that's the master physician. He knows why you're doing it. So he deals with your why more than he do with your what. That's why people always judge you on what you do. But he said, man, look on the outside. I look on the heart. Only God knows why people do what they really do. So he is a just judge because he can handle it because he have a master scalpel. He know just when to cut, and not only when, but where and how. He knows you. He know what happened to you while you're doing what you're doing. So we don't. Sometimes we trying to rush people in to get them, delivering well real quick. And it's like, no, God taking them bit by bit. He's like an onion. He's peeling it back bit by bit. And he ain't trying to kill them, get everything done, and then they just, fall out. He's taking his time. So, he nursing them.
It's a lot of cutting. It's a lot of cutting that gotta happen,
Yeah. And he take his time. What I'm saying is he knows, he's strategic. So if we give people a little bit more grace and work with them and love them through it, and when you see it, you pray out for them, they will do better a lot quicker than you just, like the woman caught in adultery. Stone her. The first thing they said, and they caught her in the act, got her out the bed with the man. Yep. Moses' law says she's supposed to be dead, stoned. Jesus. So he's just like that. He didn't even touch it.
And that's we got to understand that when God fixed something, when he working on something, he working on it for it to be fixed, for it to be healed, for it to be something to move on. And, when we create these situations, so I tell Dion, hey, you shouldn't be listening to music, or you shouldn't be drinking, whatever. What ends up happening is we get a bunch of Christians who don't do stuff in public. You know what I mean? They feel like they gotta, they gonna do it. They just gonna do it to make sure that you don't know anything about it. You know what I mean? And there's no healing and there's no growth in that. You know what I mean? And so we have these doctrines. I mean, there's even whole religions that are built around that, to where you just got a whole bunch of people in that situation that put on this front like they got it all together, like they don't do anything wrong, like they don't have any problems. That's a lot what the Pharisees had going on. They used to walk around with their robes and their knowledge and scripture and all of this and act like they had it all together. And then Jesus came and was showing that they don't got it all together, right? And they got a problem with that. Like, how dare you, show that I'm not a perfect person, And that's where I think it becomes problematic, because you have people who aren't saved, you have people who are saved, and then they feel like they walk in these situations and the expectation is, and I remember, I'll say this for me personally. I remember there was a time where I used to go up to the altar like every Sunday. Every time they did an altar call, I was up there, at the altar, like, because I did something that week that I felt. And so I felt like every time I did something wrong, I had to go up there and I had to go on the altar. I get saved again. I had to get saved again. Like, that was the mentality that I had, with that. And this is before I realized that what God did on the cross covered all that. Like, what I did in the past, what I'm gonna do in the future, what I'm doing now, his blood was big enough for all of that. Now I just gotta give it to him. I gotta, give him my life. I gotta, be obedient to what he's saying or what he's telling me to do, right? And convicting me in. And that's what I have to do. Like I don't have to go up to the altar every day, every week now and ask somebody to pray for me. I go directly to him. Like, God, ooh, I messed up right now. Like, that's the relationship, and, I see too many times, I read too many messages where people are saying, oh, if I do this, am I not saved? You mentioned it earlier, like about, Tim Ross. Is he saved or not saved because he said a cuss word online or whatever? Like, we feel like we can lose our salvation that easily, just based off of us not being perfect when we're not perfect. This flesh is not perfect.
If we could lose our salvation for stuff we did or didn't do, that means salvation would be by works and not grace and not faith. So you cannot do it by what you do or don't do. You have to receive Christ by faith. That's where salvation come in. Because if it's based on performance, then that means it's not grace. That's like you got to work for it. And it can't be that because, all of our works on our best day, would it say our righteousness as filthy rags on the worst day? So you have to accept them by faith and by grace, we save.
Yeah.
It's not on performance, good, bad, or in between. It's not. It's a belief system. I believe that Jesus Christ, he died on the cross. He raised up on the third day. I believe that is true. I accept his blood sacrifice in place of my sins, future, past, and present. And that settled the deal.
Now, as we're on this earth and as we walk, we need to be walking with God, talking with him, have this relationship. He's going to continue to work with us. He's going to continue to push us in the right direction. Like Sonya said, pull out that scalpel and cut here and cut there. And, we just got to learn to give each other some grace with that and empathize and, look at each other. Like, we all need support. That's what the church is supposed to be about, like not breaking each other down, but really helping to lift each other up. And, Galatians tells us, like, you see a brother fall, go back and pick him up with gentleness and be careful not to fall down there with him, but, that's the heart of what it's really about. And, if we're doing it the opposite way of, hey, beating up on everybody that we see something that happens to them. And it's normally going to be celebrities. It's going to be people who got their life out there, for everybody to see. While we go into our little closets and our little rooms and do stuff that is definitely and is even more unpleasing.
The people that we have the least grace for is the people around us, like husbands, wives, parents, children. Like, we judge them the harshest, like, because they raise you a certain way, then you get grown and you see something different. And then all of a sudden you be really upset with them. I'm not saying that they didn't abuse or they didn't, usurp their authority. I'm not saying they did, but it's the toughest for people in your zone, like husbands and wives. They the hardest on each other. I mean, man, husband, he better not look at nothing. You got a demon, but if I do something, I just got an issue. But you doing it, that's a demon. That's a demon. It's like, now you gossiping and you talking, but I got all the demons,
Right.
So, I'm serious. And a lot of times we don't know, like our parents endure things they don't talk about. And so we had the repercussions when they raising us. Right. And a lot of times it inflicted harm on us, so to speak, in a way that you feel like, man, I would have been better off if they would have did me better. But you have to find a way to have grace because you don't know their story. You weren't raised. You just came in on the part of the movie where you showed up.
Right.
So they have all this stuff that happened to them that you're not privy to. And it's a reason why they act the way they act toward you. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's hard when you're the one getting pain inflicted on to have grace on the one causing the pain. And so a lot of times we're the harshest on people we're close to, family, husbands, wives. So most of the time, the most grace, we got to find it in our families, in that house, but with our mates, with our kids, with our parents, and forgive them, because you're just not privy. Even when you marry people, you have no idea how they were really raised. You know what you see and what they say, but a lot of this stuff, they don't breathe it.
Right.
It just seep out of the source, but they're not telling you.
Facts.
So when we talk about that master scalpel, the first place is family, where it'd be tough on families. They have a hard time because you judge them real harsh because of what happened to you, or your husbands and wives, how they talk to each other. So if we find to do that at home, we'll do better with everybody else, because it'd be tight.
Yeah. That's what it takes. Like God, He's showing us the blueprint. He forgives us. He gives us grace, and we don't reciprocate that. We receive all His grace and His forgiveness for what we do, but we don't want to, give it. And He's giving it to us so we can give it, and so we can, be free from it, because that forgiveness, it's so true about things that we blame on our parents and how our parents treat us. We don't know their future. I think that movie The Shack did a great job of articulating that visually on the big screen. We don't know what they dealt with, right? And unfortunately, like a lot of our parents, they get at an age to where it might be too late for them to even get the healing that they need for that, in some cases. And so we're holding them accountable for something that they never really got the chance to get help or therapy or whatever on it. And they pass that trauma to us one way or another. You got freedom from it, or God's giving you freedom from it, and giving you the ability to go back and, release that person from that hold and introduce them to the thing that can get them to heal. It's a whole cycle in it, and I thank you for bringing that point up, Simon. That's an awesome point. And the last thing that I mentioned when we were in the green room was, I feel that because we have these certain proclivities, right? God tells me, hey, I need to stop doing this. We get extra judgmental for people who are doing the thing that God asked us not to do. And we get mad because they ain't doing it. They not being convicted or working on that particular point. And so we get extra judgmental on them.
At different levels in their walk, but when you are asked or suggested or commanded by God to stop doing something, then that's for you in your walk, because He's trying to take you to this or that place or whatever, and He needs you to, cut that out now. They may have a little bit more grace in that area, because they're not going where you're going, they're going somewhere else. So that's not, necessarily on the table for them right now. What they dealing with is something else or whatever. And so we have to be able to understand that, we're not all on the same path. We're not going to the same place. At the end of the day, we all have different places in this life or on this side that we're going to. Now, ultimately, we're going to the same place afterwards, but our walk here on earth or whatever is taking us in different directions. And whatever God tells you to stop, just stop. Because you spending all this time and energy and anger being mad about somebody else being able to still cuss or fornicate or whatever the person may be. You wasting time. You wasting time getting yourself together. Because God said you need to get together and stop, saying whoremongering and and cussing at people and all the stuff you doing and lying and backbiting and all that stuff. You heard me? Told you to stop. So when I come talking about sister so-and-so and how short her skirt was in church or whatever, let me talk. Let me do my backbiting. Because this is I want to stop. He told me to stop.
He had told me, I still can backbite a little bit. I still can get down like that.
Okay.
We just giving examples.
Yes.
And I will tell you something, human behavior, Shelton, like whatever your weakness is, you always talk about the most. If I meet people 20 minutes, if we having a conversation, their weakness come up. If they talk about, oh, they so ugly. Look at how ugly they ugly. That's because you think you ugly. Yes. Oh, look how big they are. Look how big they are. And it's like, that's because you think you big. And you might physically not be, but that's what you worried about. It come out a good 20 minutes into a conversation. Whatever you always talking about, that's usually your weakness. And you mad about it because that's your problem. And it come up. That's our human nature. Whatever bothering you, I can't believe they over there doing it. That's because you did all that. That's because you used to do that. The old mothers in the church that's mad about the young girls wearing the short skirt because they wore all the short stuff and now they can't.
Oh, they still want to.
Look at that. So
you better not put that busted can of biscuits in that skirt.
Yeah. Don't do it.
Oh,
so whatever your weakness is, most times what you're talking about. So, but I'm with you, Sheldon. It's just on your mind because that's your thing, and you want to put it off on everybody else, but that's not everybody's thing. So we just have grace, and we got to be self-aware. Stuff that bothers us, that's not the same thing that bothers everybody. And God's working on everybody that lets Him.
Welcome to the talk show.